Well, Apollo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. The transition is always a kind of a unique but also similar path for many Olympic athletes. So it was an interesting, and it still is an interesting ongoing journey.
Yeah. Looking forward to hearing more about it. And I think I'd be remiss if we didn't just kind of address kind of what's going on right now here, April 2020. We're in the middle of the COVID-19, pandemic, and obviously really changed how life is operating in America at the moment. Your thoughts on how all of this has kind of gone down, and if you could maybe put yourself back into that competitive mindset, and just kind of like what are these athletes going through at the moment, just with their frame of mind, with understanding that the games have been postponed, it looks like, for another year now?
I think first and foremost, pre-decision to postpone the games, the athletes were kind of training and living in this environment that is not unlike what many of us who are no longer competing are feeling like. So lots of uncertainty, unsure about how they should peak, how they should structure their recovery, their training, and also just all the constant influx of distractions that are happening around them. So, as an Olympic athlete, you're supposed to be living in this bubble, in this world that only you can control all of these kind of externalities that are entering into your world. But now you've got something that are affecting people who are close to you. And so lives are at stake, but you're still trying to keep this focus. And so it was a really challenging time for a lot of athletes. And I know that if I could put myself back in their shoes, the first thing that I would probably have to do is really just drill down two options. One, is it going forward? And I would train as if it would. And then two, if it doesn't, what is my plan B? I think the reality is that when you're deep in that conversation with yourself about this particular timeline, it's much easier said than done. And so after the IOC finally came out and, in my opinion, did the right thing of pushing this back and essentially giving the athletes an answer, regardless of which way it was going to be, just an answer and a definitive, and now a new, somewhat kind of, at the time, a new target to know, hey, look, this is going to happen. It's going to happen, we hope, in a year. And at least now you can disengage from the daily kind of grind and stress that you are focusing on trying to be your best. And many of these athletes, they didn't have access to their training facilities, right? So now if you live in a small apartment in a city, maybe I always wondered about the Italian team, right? What is the Italian team doing? They have no access to anything. Or many Europeans who live in Europe at the time when this crisis was really peaking in that area. So I think it was very individual, these experiences, but at the most part, at least they have an answer now, and they can take a step back. They can recalibrate the training program mentally and physically. They can assess what they need to do to make sure they have the legs, the energy, the stamina, and the focus for the next 12 to 18 months. What does that look like? For those who are younger and who are ready, that's probably much easier for them than it is for an athlete who's going for his or her fourth or fifth Olympics, who are a little bit tired, who have considered retiring pre-games, and now they're being told, you got to keep this going for another year and a half. So on one side, I get it, and it is challenging, but at the same time, I mean, athletes are diverse. They are masters of adaptation. So, the coaches and the leadership around the athletes needs to constantly be giving them information around, it's going to be okay. It's time to disengage, get back on the balcony, metaphorically speaking, survey the landscape, understand what it is that you're going to be facing, what challenges are here today, and then in a calm, calculated manner, take the steps forward necessary to progress towards whatever that new goal is. That's the only thing that you can do. And anything else that you're thinking about or worrying about is pure noise, and it's not going to help in progressing you forward. So that's the approach that I probably would have taken in a much more calm state 10 years after my retirement. I can say that openly and cleanly. At the time, I probably would have been a whole mix of emotions like many of the athletes are facing. And so I get it. But at least I think now, hopefully, time has given me, through the scars that I've accomplished over the years, more insights into what would be a more effective response to these types of really challenging and chaotic times.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's very challenging, but these athletes are kind of conditioned to deal with adversity and really adjust on the fly. And
Right.
obviously not an ideal situation for anybody, but you're right. Kind of like having the ability to take a step back, I think is really important right now. And then obviously re-engage here when this all kind of gets a chance to dissipate. So,
Right.
would love to kind of get into the transition of your career and your retirement and really kind of what you're up to now. But I think, would definitely just want to touch on your career just for a quick second. And just curious if, when you look back on your career, if there is either a moment in time that you just look back on really fondly, or maybe there's a moment in time that you didn't quite realize was as special as it was now that you've had a chance to kind of reflect back on your career.
Yeah, I think there's many, many times and many years that I reflect when thinking back on my career, and reflect in a way that gives me significantly more gratitude than probably I had at the time. My entire career was a very special time. I think most Olympic athletes would say that. It's a very simple life, right? The responsibilities are really, there's not that many, and you're young enough typically to be able to go through the process and really only focus at the tasks at hand. Now, one of the challenges of being so young and then achieving success in a sport is you stop thinking about what type of parachutes you're going to need after you jump out of the plane, i.e. retire or decide to walk away from sport. But looking back on my career, I miss it all. There's not really a particular race or Olympics that were really that special to me, although the 2002 games, because it was my first, they were really meaningful. But overall, they were all really special in their own specific and unique ways. That allowed me to continue this drive throughout my career that seemed like it was every day was fresh and new and exciting. And there wasn't one day that, I went into one of these Olympics one of these training sessions that I didn't want to be there. I really didn't allow that to step into my mind. So I miss those days of that kind of constant grind, but also progress, right? The beautiful thing about sport is that you're able to recognize almost instantaneously if the program or the plan is working for you in real time. You can almost feel it. You can almost sense it. And, in life, many times you'll go down a path for 4 years and you'll end up and be like, wow, that was nothing that I should have been doing. And you may not get an answer for a long time. So in sport, there is a little bit of a difference there. However, it's just, I miss the camaraderie of my teammates. I miss the training. I also miss being that fit. I mean, cognitively speaking, like my mental processing power was so clean and so pure, and my energy levels were so high. It was unbelievable. So I look back on many things in my day, and now, instead of looking back with envy, I try to just take from those elements and attributes that I was using, or those programs, and I try to sprinkle them into my daily life today. And that seems to be very, very effective and helpful.
Yeah, and definitely we'll get into that here in a second. And if you could just share with us, like, how did your retirement come about? Was it something that you made a conscious choice? You were going to end after this specific time or this specific competition, or was that choice made for you?
I decided to retire after the 2010 Olympic Games. Now, I had known going in that I probably was going to walk away from the sport. Now, I was very healthy. I was still young. I still had a lot of ability to pursue additional Olympics. I probably could have gone to 2 more Olympic Games and made the team. But I was at a stage, I think, both in my life and my career, that I was really hungry for that transition. And I wanted to do it. I wanted to seek out new learning experiences and grow. And I wanted to roll the dice on the world of entrepreneurship. I wanted to see what else was out there. And I felt that I understood the Olympic path so well in so many different ways. And I had experienced so much of it that I wanted to see if I could bring those experiences to different avenues and paths in my life, and see if I could still achieve same levels of success. So I knew that going into the 2010 Olympic Games. And then when I went to the 2012 Olympic Games as a broadcaster for NBC, and I was commentating on some of the athletes that I knew personally, whether it was a Phelps or one of the track and field guys, the interesting thing was, in my mind, introspectively, I started to have this conversation of, hey, maybe you can come back for the 2014 Olympic Games. Maybe you have enough in you. You're seeing and surveying what's happening in the World Cup circuit and short track right now. they don't look like they've improved that much. I still think I have what it takes. That voice was always there. And I was aware that that voice sometimes is not the most trustworthy of voices. It has its own agenda, right? And it kind of forgets about what is required to reach that level of expertise and performance. And so after coming home from those 2012 games and having those conversations with myself, I disengaged. I took a break from kind of being in the mix of the hype and the excitement around the Olympic Games. And I said, okay, is this something that I really, really think is going to be important and meaningful in my life? And what will I give up if I do that? And so I tried to make a very calculated decision. And in the end, I said, you know what? Although I do think I could make the team again, I do think I could be competitive. I think it's more important for me at this stage of my life to continue these external pursuits. And that's what I decided to do. And so the first thing that I did that I think was a little bit different than what some other athletes would probably do in my position was, instead of spending time here domestically in the United States to really pursue branding and my strength here, I instead decided to go the furthest place that I could. And that place was Asia. And me being half Japanese, me having experiences with a Chinese coach which I won gold with in 2006, I fell in love with Asia and Asia culture and the way that Asia was really booming in terms of its business. And so I spent time in Hong Kong, in China, Singapore, Taiwan, all over Southeast Asia, really in pursuit of different types of businesses. And I started to become a director. I was an advisor. I was putting deals together. They were in infrastructure, green technologies. They were in public transportation, textiles, manufacturing, acquisitions. It was all over the map. And the reality was I didn't have any experience in any of these fields and sectors. I literally had none. So when you say, well, what the hell were you doing trying to negotiate $100 million deals or $300 million deals between a factory in China and investment bankers in London? I would tell you, I was just thrown into the fire and I tried to learn. So that where I was getting some of this excitement that was missing from sport, and I was getting that from business. And I was just hungry to learn, to be honest with you. So I knew that I still had this competitive drive, and I wanted to win in the same respect that I had in sport. And I thought that I could replicate that and duplicate that in business. And I was in for a rude awakening. I knew and didn't understand the complexities, the interpersonal relationships that were required, the business connection and relationships and hierarchy that was existing in certain cultures and business norms in different parts of the world, and how wildly different they were, right? So someone doing business in London versus doing business in Jiangsu, China, are completely different. And not even the language barrier is just one part of that. So I had, and this is one example. So I had this beautiful array and this empty palette and empty canvas to be able to paint whatever direction I was going in. And I was just throwing this dart and I was experiencing it. And that's how I really started to understand my love for two things. One was people and cultures, and two was business in general. And it was through that kind of trial by fire that I found and understood some of the strengths that I had naturally coming up out of the Olympic space and what I had to offer. And that's how my transition was. But if I was going to tell you that if it was easy in any respect, and I should preface this by saying I was one of the lucky ones, right? I was very blessed to be able to have NBC shine the spotlight on me during the competition, to have sponsors and partners and speaking engagements and the Fortune 100 knocking on the door, asking me to come give inspirational, motivational, consultational discussions and conversations with their C-suite or their teams. That wasn't happening for 99% of the competitors that we were with, right? That's the reality. And so I can't say that without, I had a tremendous amount of flexibility post games that many don't have. So I took advantage of that. I really did. But to be completely honest with you, it didn't help me over in Asia. None of those things helped me. No one cared. No one even knew who I was in most of these business meetings. They had no idea. They just thought I was just some young punk kid who was trying to run these deals. And so, and I also didn't want to be in those rooms because of my accolades, because of my titles. I had the chip on my shoulder that I wanted them to recognize me because I was supposed to be there. And that made me work very, very hard. So I recognized very early that the discipline, the self-sacrifice, and the understanding that I can outwork most people, even if I'm not as intelligent, even if I don't have that kind of genetic ability, I know that I can find a path somewhere, some way that is unique to me, that gives me an advantage or value. So that was
Yeah.
my process.
Yeah, I like what you said about wanting to earn it and not just wanting to be in the room just because of what you had done previously.
Yeah.
Was this all going on previous to the 2010 Olympics? Like, were you kind of getting your feet wet with the speaking and
Yeah.
different business dealings, or did this all happen kind of directly after your retirement?
No, so it didn't happen directly after my retirement. It actually started after my first Olympic experience in 2002. And that's when I started the speaking circuit, and I started to understand the ability to connect with different businesses around the world and what they were looking for, particularly here in the United States. And then I started angel investing quite early into companies both in Salt Lake City and other parts of the United States, in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and just started to explore what that would look like. And that was my first foray into the realm of investing. Again, it was very hands-off, and I didn't have a lot of insight into the operational needs or requirements of those businesses. But I knew that I wanted to win. And looking back, some of those lessons were very painful from a capital perspective. I mean, I made a lot of very bad decisions investing into bad businesses or the wrong business partners for the wrong reasons. So my MBA came in the form of using my own resources, which I would not recommend. It's the most painful.
Great lessons, but yeah, I can imagine very painful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
As an Olympic athlete, and really any high level athlete, you live this uncommon life where you mentioned a moment ago, it's a very simple life, but definitely not easy. But it seems like you were able to kind of roll a lot of those lessons into that next piece of your life. You mentioned kind of the hard work and the grit that it took to succeed on the ice, but then at the same time putting in that work on the business front. Was that something that happened naturally for you, or did you kind of have to learn it over time, like you just alluded to in terms of those hard lessons?
I wish I could tell you that it was natural. It was something that maybe it looked like it was natural from the outside, but I really had to learn it. And I'm still learning. I learn every single day. I mean, I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly trying to inform myself and grow on a personal development perspective. And I think the things that it helped me realize was some of the natural strengths and some of the passions that I have just connecting with other human beings, regardless of the business, seem to be a constant theme in all of the interactions, either internationally and domestically. Was my curiosity, my passion, and just a need to want to understand more, and that seemed to help bridge that gap much more rapidly.
And was there a grieving process for you after you retired? It seems like you had a pretty good handle on understanding that was kind of your last games in 2010, but I know you kind of referenced kind of getting a little bit of an itch being at the 2012 Olympics. So was there any type of grieving process for you, or did you feel like after that 2012 kind of moment of reflection, you were able to put it to bed?
There was many times in my career post 2010 that I really missed the simplicity and the lifestyle. And to be frank with you, being number one, right? Being the absolute best in the world, the top 0.001% of any competitor. That's it's empowering to feel like that and know that you have control over that destiny. I think what helped me come to terms with that grieving process, and when I say grieving, I mean there's been every Olympic athlete will probably go through a depressive stage post-career. Now, the degree at which this depression happens can be very rapid and very steep. It can be gradual over the course of 10 years. And if you're not paying attention on an emotional, on a cognitive, on a spiritual, on a physical level, it slowly erodes away at your ability to become your best work, whatever path that you're doing. So I think the conversation needs to happen really early. And it needs to be very transparent, radically transparent. And I think that most athletes can take it. And it's better, I don't know if you call it the rip the Band-Aid off approach, but I think that it helps coming to terms to look in the mirror and say, your career as an Olympic athlete competitively is over. and for many who did not finish on a note that they thought predestined that they were supposed to finish on, like winning gold to be on the podium or making a team, that's a very painful conversation to have with yourself. And then take it a step further and say, I am not solely tied to this one identity. The Olympic athlete in me is not only who I am. It's a part of who I am. And it's a strong part of who I am. And it's a very unique part of who I am. But if we're all like our own individual diamonds, we've got thousands of different facets and areas that we need to polish. Some of them may be dirty. Some of them may not be as clear at the moment that we're looking at this diamond right now. But eventually all of us will come out with a beautiful diamond. But none of us will come through without having our imperfections. That's the reality. So once you look at it from that perspective and see, okay, I've got all these facets, I've got maybe all these interests, I've got some curiosities, I just don't know which ones that I'm good at. That's the best part. Getting to that conversation is the best part for someone who's going through transition is, what am I good at? What am and what can I do? Because most athletes don't know. They only think that you can only go in circles wearing these ridiculous skin tight outfits, skating against other athletes. So the changes have to occur in a way that I think are progressive, that are metric based, and that someone other than yourself is holding you accountable. So I'm a firm believer that you need some sort of a mentor, guide, team, coach, etc. It's like training for the Olympics, having no team and no coach. It's very hard. Maybe you can get through it, but that's like 0.001% of the people in the Olympic space could probably do that. And probably it's not that realistic. Yeah. So we need the support system. It's really important. And that can be your friends, your family, your loved ones, new friends to help you grow and help you get comfortable being uncomfortable. So we spend our entire lives going down this road of understanding that we can handle and manage more physical pain than any other humans on the planet. However, when it comes time to go do something that we're uncomfortable doing, whether it's public speaking or singing or dancing, we're like, no, that's not for me. Hey, what the hell? That's not true. It's just you've just now looked at the different part of the diamond, right? And so the same approach is there. And I think that what you guys are doing and developing and curating these systems and these processes help athletes recognize the first thing, their own strength, which then in turn goes to the next step, gives them a little bit of confidence. It's like having your first win, even if it wasn't gold. Maybe it was the first time you almost got bronze and you're like, oh man, at some competition that maybe is not even a big World Cup, we need that little bit of progress to feel it. Whether it's swinging a tennis racket, playing ping pong, writing, we just need that little bit. And once we taste it, then it's like the spark that begins. I don't know if I was going off topic, I apologize, but that's kind of where my thought was going.
You mentioned accountability and how important that is for somebody in the midst of the transition. And I'm just curious from your perspective or kind of who was there for you, holding you accountable? Was there any type of program that you were involved in, or was it a specific one or two people? You talked about having that support system. Who was there for you to hold you accountable during your transition?
It's interesting because I didn't have someone specific that was holding me accountable, but I sought out mentors in my life where I thought that I was really lacking. So financial, fundamental literacy was one that I didn't study in school. I didn't understand it. And so I needed to really manage what that looked like because I had made many bad business decisions in terms of bad investments, et cetera. And I wanted to eliminate that moving forward. And so there's two people. One was my father, who's always been a great mentor, teammate, and friend and father. And I think as I've grown, I call it my personal, I call it the personal board of directors. Who is the personal board of directors who can all give you insights and have an open conversation to say, hey, look, this is where, you need to be. You've got this, hyperactivity that is going on in your mind. You can't stay concentrated on one thing for one time. You need someone to be able to take some of these elements that we're talking about and pin them to you and say, let's talk about how you can progress through this. And so I've had a couple of people who, one was on the financial side, one was on the personal development side, one was on the mindset side to make sure that I was still continuously keeping up with both my health and fitness, because I'm a firm believer that if I start to fail here, a lot of it's got to do with what's happening here as well. So I wanted to make sure that I'm continuously moving. I'm not too out of shape. I mean, I'm far out of shape in comparison to what I was, but I stay active, and I've now made that a priority. And that's my sanctuary. That's how I begin my day. Nothing else disturbs that. And the days that I don't make that a priority, I notice it. It's unbelievable. So again, I think it's about finding your routine, finding that your personal board of directors, and building it in a way that you recognize that you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with. And so you really have to take that to heart. I still am working on that today because I've made so many friends over the years. Some of my friends, they may or not be contributing to my life in a way that's meaningful in any capacity. And that's also okay, right? But I think that as we grow, life is really short. And if you have some specific goals for yourself, you want to surround yourself with people and individuals who inspire you, who push you, and who question you when you need to be questioned. And that personal board of directors is exactly how you would run if you are your own Fortune 50 company and you're one of the most important companies here in the United States. Who would you choose to help you govern those decisions on a quarterly basis? You would choose the smartest people you could possibly get your hands on, way smarter than you, with more experience, who've got different insights from different sectors and different businesses. Well, your own personal life and personal board of directors needs to be the same way. And now you're being thrust into this new world that is unfamiliar, that you don't have experience, you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to need to have some guidance. And there's nothing wrong with shadowing people. There's nothing wrong with starting from scratch. Take pride in that process and recognize this is a long game. This is not an Olympic race or Olympic final. This is a long game. And every day that you take it step by step, but apply the same discipline that you had, use that with your personal board of directors, is when you can really have true progress. At least that's the way that I would conceptually think about that.
I totally believe that you are the company you keep. I actually have my own personal board of directors, so absolutely love it. And, for me personally, it's like people have come into my life in different ways, whether it was like a professor or maybe somebody I had met at an event or maybe just through friends. And it's like something about that person, they just have a spark and it just makes you want to be around them and nurture that relationship. And I'm curious for you, with some of your mentors, was it something where you were introduced to them specifically for that mentor relationship, or was it something that you had to build over time?
I had to build them over time. So some of these people I met either at conferences or just randomly on an airplane. We became friends and we stayed in touch. And I saw, I'll give you one example. I won't say his name, but there's a guy. I was flying to Las Vegas for a speaking engagement. I was standing in line. The guy who was standing in front of me, as we're all just standing waiting to board this plane, turned around, looked at me. And this was like right after one of the Olympics, and says, "Oh my God, Apolo, how are you? I was a part of so-and-so company at these games. It's great to see you. What are you doing in Vegas?" And it happened to be that I was speaking for one of the companies that he works with at the same event. So I kept that relationship going. He's a very successful investment manager. He's got a very pragmatic and calculated approach to career path, life in general. And his advice has always been very sound. And so he's a very conservative thinker, someone who says, "Apolo, concentrate on your strengths. That's what's unique to you." And he's just always given me great advice. And so he's been one person that I've stayed in contact with. And then there's been several other. I have someone who, on the overall longevity, health, and fitness side, I consider to be one of the absolute world's best experts and doctors in that realm. And he was someone who reached out to me on Instagram because he wanted to do a podcast. And we've remained very good friends, and someone who challenges me on a daily basis to rethink how I understand and reverse engineer problems. Because that's the way that his brain works. My brain does not naturally work in that perspective instinctually. And so it's really helped me decipher how I make investment decisions, how I make decisions on a daily basis, how my relationship with food is, right? He's just been a great mentor. So most of these have not been just kind of fall out of the sky. I've had to work on all these relationships over and over again. Because again, everyone who is I call it a high quality individual and a high performing individual, they themselves are busy, and they themselves are also looking for their own personal board of directors. But at the end of the day, I still believe that human beings are willing and wanting to help one another, and take advantage of that, because you will be at some stage in your life, be that person who is on someone else's board of directors. And you want to be able to give the same type of insights and experiences that you learned and pass that on so that we can start learning at an earlier age.
You still had to kind of invest in those people just like they were going to invest in you. So I think it's just a great message to get out there. And I think it's also important because going through this transition, just because you won a gold medal or you won 8 Olympic medals doesn't mean that this transition is something that is going to be easy or that is going to be given to you. And I'm just curious, what challenges, if there was anything specific that you faced as you went through your retirement, whether it was mental or maybe some physical challenges as well?
The physical side was just dealing with, I think, the new body that I had, and the fact, when I say new body, meaning I wasn't training like the same way that I was training before. I wasn't doing the 3 workouts a day. I wasn't eating as clean as I probably was when I was training. I wasn't getting as much sleep. All of that takes a toll eventually. So, Miriam and I were having this conversation the other day that from a pure chemical perspective, Olympic athletes are they're almost like drug addicts who all of a sudden the next day are no longer taking drugs. There's going to be a severe shock to your system unless you transition slowly and you continue that physiological process. So on the physiological side, I've recognized several times throughout my career that I need to make it a priority. And I would say today, I have a real handle on it. I know what works for me. I know how much I need to work out. I know how important it is for me to maintain that consistency of mind and body, right? My mind and my body. And then also, I think on the challenging side, on the mental side, was really just dealing with the fact that I'm in a new world with new tools and new opportunities. And if I want to win in that way, I have to apply the same discipline I did in skating. And there is no guarantee in outcome. That was a real challenge to me. At least I knew in sport that there was, when you train hard and you do everything right, there's a sense of real fulfillment that you can get from that process. And I really, really had struggled with that post-career. I just felt that I should be winning when I wasn't, or I wondered why when it could have been better. And then, time, even just me conversating about this, it allows me to have a different conversation, say, well, what's the long game? What does Apollo want out of life? And what does life want from Apollo? And they're kind of 2 different answers, actually. And if you can make them the same, it's even better. But that conversation I have often in relation to the mental challenges, and that brings me back to my homeostasis, back to square one. And I would say in the past 3 years, 2.5 years, this conversation has been way more important to me, is making sure I'm focused on the things that I feel are impactful, that I'm doing the things that I love to do, and I'm providing people hopefully guidance in some perspective to not make the same mistakes that I did and accelerate their growth process to achieve their true potential, because I just know how much of the mind can be this incredible advocate and supporter, or it can make you a prisoner. And so I had a conversation yesterday with some friends of mine as we were doing this they have these quarterly update meetings for all their 400, 500 employees. And, as we're going through these really challenging and chaotic times, people are asking, how are you managing this in your head? And so today happens to be a really challenging environment for everyone across the globe. And I think it's going to be continuously challenging. So how do you manage this? So if you think about your mind, the mind is like a river of thought. And these thoughts are always constantly coming. Some are happening without your control, which sucks and is tough. But don't allow one of those thoughts, one of those negative thoughts, to stick to your mind and start to detract or start to take away from the way that you interact with the world, your loved ones, with work, with people, and with yourself. And you can be your own governor of your speed limit. So only you can know how hard you should push, how fast you should go, if it's time to slow down, if it's time to take a breath and kind of find your center. And these are some of the challenges that I was facing many times throughout my career post. And I feel as I get older and I go through these experiences, I start to recognize just how important it is to practice these routines, to recognize how powerful our mind is. And so as I kind of look forward to the next stages in my life, especially for 2020, it's become much more mission driven to help people recognize their own confidence, their own strengths, and their own mental ability to overcome any challenge. And I'm just a firm believer that the Olympic spirit, the symbolism of what those games at its core essence can stand for, is needed now. And people around the world can really draw from these insights and apply them to their own lives. Olympic athletes are no different than the person walking on the street. The person who's an Olympic athlete just chose something to try to become superhuman about. They themselves, and by the way, some athletes are superhuman, right? We all know them. We know their genetic ability. They're born for those sports, okay? But I would say most weren't. But the mind was a separating tool. And so once we understand that we have control over this, or at least we have the ability to direct this in a way that is the most meaningful, if I can contribute to society and the world in that capacity, that makes me very happy.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I like your analogy with the river of thought, and kind of you make the decision on what's going to stick to the banks. And I'm curious for you, you know, I've heard you talk about the 2002 Olympics, and I heard you talk one time about how they were chanting your name, and gosh, what an amazing moment that must have been. And so like, as you transition, thinking about that, like, here's this moment in time where you're, you know, for lack of a better term, the center of the universe for that one moment. And now you're kind of having to adapt to a new role in society. Was that kind of some of the same principles that you used to deal with that? Or did you have any experience with those types of feelings of inadequacy or just challenges with your new role?
Yes to all of it. I've faced many of those challenges in the new role. I wasn't prepared for it, and I didn't prepare for it properly. I can say that now openly. I absolutely did not prepare for that properly. And I think ways that I could have prepared better, we all know them. But through those mistakes that I made, I was able to, it's like this. My life has gone a certain way. I've had amazing home runs, and I've had amazing wipeouts falling right on my face. But regardless of the outcome, I've always gotten up time and time again, every day, to try to become better, to try to learn, try to do the right thing, and try to help others also go along that path that is a little bit more linear and less like this, right? Or less like this, right? So I think when you're trying to invoke change, there's many things that you can do immediately that will give you change. So for some, it may be, let me shock the system physiologically. So let me set a new goal, whether it's a triathlon or a marathon or 5K or whatever it is. Let me start something that seems to jumpstart our mentality. And as Mary and I said, those chemicals change as you get older. And so understanding that we are chemical processes as human beings, if you can have some control over getting those great dopamine and serotonin and responses consistently, if you feel better, you're gonna emotionally be better at work, in your focus and everything. So don't skimp out on the things just because you're now retired and I'm no longer an athlete. That's fine. It's okay to say that, but you have to take care of yourself first and foremost. So I think self-care seemed to be something that really helped me understand what the next stage was going to be in my life. And then number two would be having open dialogue with myself on a consistent basis. And then number three was, Apollo, don't underestimate the power of your mind. And such a firm believer that I've seen it and I've felt it when I have done the things necessary from a mindset perspective. It has always been an excellent outcome. It hasn't always been a win, but the outcome has always been phenomenal.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I was going to ask, after retirement, I've heard you describe this beautiful moment where you kind of realize, and you mentioned it earlier, kind of like that this whole new world of possibilities is open to you. And I think that you have a choice, whether you kind of view this as, oh my gosh, I'm starting from scratch and I'm 32 going on 22 and I have no job experience, or you can look at it as, I've had this great career already, and now I get to start something completely new and use these great skills I learned in my sport and apply them now to this next chapter in my life.
Yeah. So I think you said it the best way possible. The world is now at your fingertips. What is it that you want to do? You can do anything. And some people may not have the luxury of doing exactly what they want to do. And so you're going to have to go through that painful process of doing some stuff that maybe sucks. And we've all seen that Venn diagram, right? Where you've got like things that suck, things that you're good at, things that you're passionate about. And you kind of try to go in the middle where you do a little bit of everything, right? That would be the gold standard, right? How do you do that in a way that if you do only the things that you're good at or only the things that you really care about, sometimes those things can't pay your bills. That's just a reality. And sometimes those things that pay your bills, they really suck. But you know what? You're an athlete, so you're used to that. So don't forget that. Your mind is where you can be the differentiating factor.
I'm curious, you have this background obviously in a smaller sport, and for the athletes out there that come from the smaller sports and don't have these huge followings, for them that are either still competing or maybe in the process of considering retirement, what type of advice would you give them coming from those smaller sports with maybe a little less visibility, just to kind of prepare for that next step in life?
Yeah. So if you come from a smaller sport that's not getting the same airtime, so to speak, or same sponsorship attention like the bigger ones, that's just a reality. And you already know that. So I don't have to tell you anything in regards to what that looks like. I think the most important thing for you to recognize now is as you move forward in this next stage, it's really important for you to maintain levels of discipline, routine, to make sure you know what's happening in your life that you can control. And then 2, be open to possibility. Be curious. Pour the cup that you thought you had of knowledge, pour it out and relearn those skills. Get out there and understand that the core attributes that made you an athlete are transferable to anything in life, and recognize that is your unique advantage. People hire Navy SEALs, military women and men, Olympic athletes because of what? Not because they're amazing high jumpers or speed skaters. They don't care about that. It's got nothing to do with the reasons why. They know you are coachable and you have the ability to learn, adapt, and be resilient. Hard work that's a prerequisite standard for all of us, right? We don't even think about that. So they're looking for people who are resilient, who are strong, who in the face of adversity can stand up and creatively find ways around to persevere and go through. That's the ultimate hire. That's who I look for to hire on my team today, right? Olympic athletes have all of that. We just don't recognize that they are chameleon in their ability to morph and meld and go into different tentacles of the world. So that's what I would tell people is, it's okay that you're going into this uncomfortable phase. It is through that phase that you will receive the most amount of growth on a personal level. And don't be afraid to fail in business. You're not going to do your power clean or your split squat perfect the first time you ever tried it. You got to remember back to those days, the first time you picked up a weight, or your first time you were on an ice rink, or whatever it was. You may not be a natural at it. And if you are, great. And maybe there's some attributes that will be shining more brightly than others, but don't be afraid to fail. It's okay. That would be my advice.
This is just natural for these athletes, the hard work and the grit and overcoming adversity. And I think also not underselling yourself. I mean, kind of realizing that a lot of people would love to talk to you. you might
Yep.
think, well, just because it's not, focused on the internet or on TV, that nobody cares. A lot of people would be really interested in talking to top collegiate athletes, top Team USA athletes, Olympians. These are all reasons why they want to talk to you and potentially hire you for jobs in the future. I want to transition and just talk about a little bit about what you're doing and kind of like how you got here. I know that, you're involved in some television projects. You've written books before, and I believe you have one coming out or that just recently came out, and you do a lot of speaking. So just want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about what you're involved in and what you're up to these days.
So my focus has really shifted and pivoted in the past 24 months. So while I still have businesses and I'm still pursuing some of these different investments all across the globe, that stuff is all fun. The thing that really moves me and the mission that I'm driven by today is purely to help people, organizations, people of those organizations to become better versions of themselves. And to do that through recognizing their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and their mindset, and to help people through this mindset process and develop these frameworks of recognizing things like the river of thought, things like going out on the balcony to survey what's in front of you today. How do you strategically align yourself with the right types of individuals who can help you progress in the way that you need? And every organization enterprise. So now we've refocused to do a couple of things. The book that you're talking about is I'm writing about the three topics are really reinvention, adaptation, and high performance under any environment. Very relevant today, obviously, as now everyone around the world is working remote. They're working from home. There's a lot of challenges that many people are not used to having. And there's a lot of accountability that they have to place upon themselves to make sure they're still being productive in the way that would give them ample time to be with their family, ample time to be productive at work, and ample time to make sure they have to themselves. So the self-care, the work care, the family care, those three attributes are also tied to your happiness, your strength, which means your health and wellness, and your ability to persevere past any challenge. So my real main goal is to help people pivot in a way that's more accelerative, to help people reinvent in a way that's less painful, to help people recognize that they themselves can be the governor of their own speed limit, and to not be a prisoner of their own thoughts, whether it's through anxiety, chaos, and uncertainty. And that's what my mission is for the world, is to develop systems, frameworks, programs, either through speaking engagements and keynotes that we've been doing with many different companies across the world, or diving deeper to really identify how can we create more output for these organizations, more output for the people. How can I help you change the way that you live your life in a way that's meaningful, that gives you way more output at work, so that by the time you come home, you can fully disengage and actually spend time with your loved ones and not always be thinking. It's much easier said than done. But that's my aim. That's what I love. And that's what I've really been focused on. So everything that we're creating moving forward, whether it's going to be through the book, whether it's going to be through social channels, whether it's going to be through the speaking engagements and the channels that come through both the website and the programs that we build digitally, all of that's going to be very, very important, I think, moving forward for the next 2 years and focal point.
Yeah, it's so important for athletes that are in transition to understand the power that their own thoughts have over their feelings and their day-to-day actions. So I think it's just a wonderful message to pass along to the athletes out there. And I think just kind of as we wrap up, just want to kind of put you in the perspective, if you could maybe go back to talk to yourself, maybe like 2008, around that time, what type of advice would you give yourself on preparing for the transition? Or is there anything that you would tell yourself just to prepare for kind of the next couple of years as you kind of wrap up your sport and prepare for life afterwards?
I would tell myself, you are the sum of the 5 people that you are with the most. That's the first thing. And really understand it. 2, I would actually try to shadow someone who I really admired in the business field that I wanted to go through. Someone who could help teach me. So really find a mentor, not just go through it on my own and make the mistakes financially and learn the hard way, but really go through it. And that can be a professor, that could be school, that could be a friend, whatever that is. Really understand what that business looks like. And then the third part is to really allow myself to recognize my own strengths. And I may have stayed in the United States. I may not have gone to Asia, but it's always easier to say, let me go back in time and tell myself in 2001 to buy Amazon stock, right? Or whatever it is. It's so easy to say that. Life doesn't work that way. So I try not to think in that way. Look, everything that has happened in my life has happened for a reason. And I have to believe that. Now, I don't believe that my end game I am destined for. I believe that I am the creator of that path. And I will not allow myself to be dictated by external environments. And I just believe that there's an ability here to get what I think I want out of life and give life what I think that I should be giving to it. And at the end of the day, I think it's really about the fulfillment. You know, my life is quite simple now. I don't need a lot to be happy. And it's better. It's better in every way when I live in that realm. So although I'm still very ambitious as a person, don't get me wrong, I'm still really competitive. And there's a lot of things that I, quote, want, right? We all know that the more you want is usually the cause of suffering. They say that in some Buddhist philosophy teachings and such. But I think there's nothing wrong with being in that game that we're playing. And if it is a man-made game, recognize the rules and play it to the best of your ability. And the one thing that people can't understand is the true power of what is between our ears. So I would tell that to myself and tell, a little bit of a long-winded answer, but first and foremost, you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. Number 2, find yourself an excellent mentor or shadow a company. Spend time there, get out of your comfort zone, really get uncomfortable and stretch and grow. And then 3 is to recognize the strengths that I have and apply them and attack them in a way that is tenacious, just like it was in sport.
I don't think that this gets enough attention in terms of what you're talking about, reaching out to people, doing your best to find a mentor, but then also taking the ability to be aware of who you're surrounding yourself with and being aware of the environments that we put ourselves in. I think oftentimes in sports, we are kind of put on teams. You don't really get to choose. And I think especially as you begin to transition, you get to choose who you are going to be surrounding yourself with. And I love what you said earlier. Let's make sure that it's high performing people that are used to setting high standards for themselves and achieving those high levels of performance. Life
is short, man. Life is short. So live it hard and live it the way that you want and live it with the people that you want to be around. It's much easier said than done, but look, the more I say it, the more I believe it. So I'm also a believer in manifesting that reality.
Well, Apollo, thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey and your perspective. Where can people find you? Is there a website or is there social media that you want to alert people to?
On Facebook, Apolo Ohno. I've got a fan page and then I've got my personal page. Find me on all the social channels, Apolo Ohno on Instagram, Apolo Ohno on Twitter, and then follow my website, apoloohno.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on LinkedIn. I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn almost daily. That seems to be my medium of expression the most. And I'd love to connect with people. So reach out if you see me and you want to have a chat.
Sounds great. Well, it was certainly an awesome perspective to hear today. Beautiful and inspiring. And we really appreciate you for sharing your story.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.